Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Montoya. Alright, so I am really excited about today's video because it is a tutorial for my very first pattern, the Tory Wrap Coat. Named it after my mama, y'all. So I've been working on this pattern for a few months and I just had this vision for this wrap coat, and I just went ahead and I'm like, you know what? It's time for me to start a pattern line. I have all these designs in my brain. I have visions for everything and I just need to let them out and share them with you all. So I'm here with my very first one, and it has three different views: view A, view B, and view C. So today in the tutorial I'm going to be sewing up view C, but sewing up view A and B is very similar. So the view C is the high-low version, which you see in the thumbnail, but you can also use this tutorial for the other views. And also during the tutorial I'll be showing you how to cut out view A and view B as well. I'll model how to do that. And another thing, I will be showing you how to cut out view C for 45-inch width fabric, because the pattern is, view C is only for 60-inch wide fabric. But y'all already know how I feel about my Ankara and how I feel about my prints. And you know prints usually only come on 45-inch wide fabric. So I made it work. But yeah, so I'll be demonstrating that for you all as well. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and jump into this tutorial. Alright, in order to determine your size, go ahead and look where it says bust. Then you want to follow that over to your bust measurement. So for me that's 35 inches, and then right above that it'll tell you the size to cut. So for me, I'm going to cut the size small. You can also check the finished garment measurements to determine which size to cut out. So you can look at the bust and waist finish measurement and see, alright, how much ease is there going to be with the size that I cut. So for me, I cut the size small, and the finished bust will be 39 inches, which gives me about 4 inches of ease in the bust area. And for the waist, I'm a size 28, so the finished measurement will be 34 inches, which gives me about 6 inches of ease around the waist. Alright, now that you know which size you're going to cut, now it's time to determine how much fabric you're going to need. So depending on whether you're using 60-inch wide fabric or 45-inch wide fabric will determine how much fabric you will need. So find your size, find the view that you cut, and also which width of fabric you will be using. In addition to your fabric, you're going to need some interfacing. So go ahead and find the size that you cut, and then it'll tell you the yardage that you need. If you are sewing view A, you will also need some bias tape for the armhole. So also determine how much you need according to your size. For pattern piece number 6, make sure that you cut at the appropriate line for the view that you are sewing. Alright, so the first thing that you want to do is go ahead and lay out your fabric with the folded edge here, and then on this side you want to have the selvage edge to the selvage edges together, and I have the right sides facing on the inside. Alright, the next thing you want to go ahead and do is lay out your pattern pieces. So go ahead and grab pattern piece number 2, which is the back pattern piece for view B and C, and on the side that says cut on fold, you want to line that up with the fold of the fabric. Next thing you want to do is lay out pattern piece number 1, which is the front pattern piece, front bodice piece for view B and C. And what you want to do, you don't have to line this up with the fold, but you do want to make sure that your grain line here is running parallel to the fabric. So don't go off of the side trying to line it up because that will throw off your grain line. So what you want to do is make sure, you can even use a ruler to make sure that your grain line is running parallel to the fabric. The next pattern piece that you want to lay out is number 6, which is the collar. And you also want to make sure that this grain line is running parallel to the fabric grain. Then you will lay out pattern piece number 7, which is the sash. And you also want to make sure that the grain line of the sash is running parallel to the fabric. Next, you'll take your pocket pattern. So this is pattern piece number 8. And we need a total of 4 of these. So first you're going to take your pocket pattern and you're going to flip it to the wrong side. You will pin this and cut it out once, giving you 2 pockets. Then once you have it like that, you'll flip it right back to the right side and you will cut it out a second time, giving you a total of 4. And you also want to make sure that the grain line of the pocket is running parallel to the fabric. Alright, so next what you can go ahead and do is pin all of your pattern pieces in place, and then you can go ahead and cut each of these out, and then I'll show you how to cut the remaining pattern pieces. Alright, so one quick tip when pinning your pattern pieces in place on your fabric. One thing that I do is pin in all of the major corners first, and then I will add additional pins where necessary. So like on this one, I pinned in all the major corners and then added additional pins. So same thing, major corners and then add additional pins where necessary. Alright, so after you have cut everything out, make sure that you include your, make sure that you transfer your notches. Alright, so for pattern piece number 2, you'll have 2 notches in the armhole area. You'll have one up top at the shoulder seam, and you'll have one at the side seam. For pattern piece number 1, you'll have 1 notch in the armhole area, 1 up top at the shoulder, and also 1 notch at the side seam. Alright, and optional for pattern piece number 2, what you can go ahead and do is at the top and at the bottom, for where we cut on the fold, you can cut a little snip into that fold of your fabric, because we do line up the fold, the center back edge, and because it's on the fold, usually you can use that crease if you have one in your fabric. But sometimes the crease can, you know, get lost, and after, you know, you've been pressing and iron, you know, pressing and things. So if you would like, you can add a snip to mark the fold here and also up top. On the collar, you should have 2 on this side. So 1 at the upper edge, which will be the shoulder notch, and 1 towards the middle, which will be the waist notch. So make sure you cut those out according to your size. And then there's no notches on the sash. Then on the pocket, you want to make sure that you include the notches on the side, and then also one here towards the front of the pocket. Alright, when doing the notches, make sure that you only snip about 1/4 of an inch to transfer those notches. So that's a real small cut. So you just, where the line is, you just make a small snip. Alright, so the next thing you want to do is reposition your fabric. So right now, I have my fabric is on the fold on this edge. But the way that I changed it is now I have selvage edges here and selvage edges over here on this side. So what I went ahead and did was I opened my fabric back up, and then I folded it in half, folded the rest of the fabric in half, going in the opposite direction. So now I have selvage edges on both sides, a folded edge here, and then on the opposite side are raw edges. So after you have repositioned your fabric, now you can lay out your pattern pieces. So you want to take pattern piece number 4, which is the skirt back piece, and you want to the side that says cut on fold, you want to line that up with the fold of the fabric. Next, what you want to do is grab pattern piece number 6 again, which is our collar, because we need a total of 4 of these. One for the lining and one for the outer. So what you want to do is have the grain line of the collar running parallel to that of the selvage edge. Alright, so that's going with the grain. So make sure your grain line is parallel to the selvage edges here. Also, forgot earlier to do our belt loops, but grab your belt loops and you can pretty much put it anywhere you have some free space. So we'll cut that out, and then also I have my sleeve laid out. That's why my collar is so far over, to accommodate for my sleeve. So make sure that is also the grain line of your sleeve is running parallel to that of the selvage edge. And I'll reposition after I cut out this large piece. I'll reposition my fabric so you all can see me cutting out the sleeve like a full view, but just know that I'm cutting out the back piece and that. But I'll reposition so you all can see me cutting out my sleeve and then also the front piece. But so let me cut this out first. Alright, don't forget to add your notches on this side. So do a 1/4 of an inch snip here and here. And then also, after you've cut out the collar again, make sure you add that waist notch at the bottom and add the shoulder notch up here at the top. Alright, next to cut out our last 2 pattern pieces. Our fabric is still with the selvage edges here and the selvage edges here. There's a raw edge up here this way, and this is the side where we just finished cutting out the back skirt piece. So what you want to do is lay out pattern piece number 3, and you want to make sure that the grain line is running parallel with the selvage edge. And then also for your sleeve, which is pattern piece number 5, the grain line is also running parallel to the selvage edge over here on this side. So what you want to do is go ahead and pin in all the major corners, cut it out, and then after you're done cutting it out, make sure that you transfer your notches. You have 2 here on this side of pattern piece 3, and then at the top of the sleeve, make sure you cut 2 notches here, 1 in the center, and then 1 here on the other side. Alright, so wherever you see a dot, you need to transfer this on your fabric. So you'll transfer 2 dots on pattern piece number 2, which is the back bodice, and you'll transfer 1 dot on pattern piece number 3, which is the front skirt piece. Now in order to transfer this dot, what you want to do is take a pin, push it through the center of the dot. You'll peel back the pattern paper, and wherever that pin is coming out, you will just go ahead and mark that with a dot. Then you'll take all of the fabric and flip it over, and where the pin is coming out, you will mark a dot. Alright, to do view C using 45-inch wide fabric, what you want to go ahead and do is lay your fabric with the fold up here, and then you want to have selvage edges on both ends, and you want to have the raw edge here. So I suggest taking your entire fabric, the amount of yards that you have, and just folding it in half, folding the entire thing in half. Then after you have done that, we won't be able to use the fold of the fabric to cut out the things on the fold, because we're limited with the width. So I'm going to show you how I work that out. So the first thing that you want to lay out is pattern piece number 4. Now even though it says the fold, we're not able to do that, so I've just lined up that edge with the selvage edge.
Then you want to take your pocket, and you'll see that I had to flip mine upside down to give it so that it would be able to fit. And the grain line is running parallel. Then take your sash, which is pattern piece number 7, and that's going to fit right nicely there, and make sure the grain line is running parallel to the selvage. Then take pattern piece number 3, lay that out, and make sure that the grain line is running parallel. Then you'll lay out pattern piece number 6 the first time, because remember we need a total of 4 of these, so we have to cut out this pattern piece twice. Okay, then you can cut out the collar one more time, which is pattern piece 6, and then cut out the pocket a second time. Also lay out the sleeve. Then I laid out the pattern piece number 1, and pretty much anywhere you have space, leftover fabric, cut out the belt loop, which is number 9. And then I also lined up pattern piece number 2, which is also supposed to be cut on the fold. I lined it up with the selvage edge. Now, because we are not cutting pattern piece number 2 and 4 on the fold, we are going to lose 3/4 of an inch of ease, but that did not make a big difference for me in the end. So it really wasn't a large loss. Now you can instead alter the pattern and add an additional 5/8 of an inch if you would like to do that. But I find that losing that 3/4 of an inch doesn't matter. So then, so let me talk about these 2 pieces next. So then now, the only thing that is different for these is now you have to create a seam to attach these pieces where they're supposed to be cut on the fold. You need to join them. Now you should join them using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then another modification that I made was to pattern piece number 6. Now the collar, right? Since we're losing inches up top here where the collar is going to end up attaching, we need to modify this piece. Now it's real simple. All you have to do is at the top of the collar, measure down 3/8 of an inch and cut that off. That's all you have to do. And you'll do that for both of them. Just from the top of the collar, measure down 3/8 of an inch and cut that off. All right, and that is going to help you, that's going to help the collar now be able to fit and match up with the bodice piece. All right, so for the remaining views, you can use the illustration in the instruction booklet, the part where it says layout. So just go ahead and pay close attention to the red arrows. You'll see I have the arrows going towards how to lay out your fabric with the selvage and the fold. Alright, now that we're done cutting everything out, the first thing that we need to do is stay stitch our skirt pieces. So that's pattern piece number 3 and 4. So up top on the waist edge, you're going to do a stay stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and this stitch is going to stay inside of the garment once it's done. So we will stay stitch both of the front pieces and also the back piece. All right, to do the stay stitch, go ahead and line up the top edge with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, lower your needle, and you don't have to do a back stitch on either end. You could just go ahead and start sewing. Alright, after you have stay stitched the upper edges, I'm going to go ahead and serge my raw edges because my fabric tends to fray a lot. If you don't have a serger, you can use a zigzag stitch or check the description box for a Pinterest post for different ways to finish off your raw edges. Alright, next what you can go ahead and do is lay out your 2 front skirt pieces with the right sides facing up. You want to grab 2 of your pockets, and we're going to be working on the side of the front, and you'll be able to tell the side because it is the longest side. So this is the side seam, and this is going to be the front of the skirt. And you can also tell that it's the side seam because there are 2 notches on the sides where we will line up our pockets. So what you want to do is go ahead and take your pockets and lay them with the right sides to the right side of the skirt piece. And then what you want to do is find the notch in the pocket and find the side notch in the skirt, and you want to line those up and you want to pin in place. Alright, after you have put these 2 pins in there, you can add some additional pins along the pocket. Alright, so after you're done with this, you'll do the same thing to this other front piece, and you'll take it to your sewing machine, and we're going to baste the pocket down in place using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Starting at either end of the pocket, either the top or the bottom, depending on which side you're working with, you want to line up the edge of the pocket with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Go ahead and lower your needle, and because we're just basting, there's no need to backstitch. You could just start sewing. Alright, next go ahead and lay out your back pattern piece, the back skirt pattern piece, with the right side facing up. And then you can take your pockets, and we're going to lay them with the right side facing the right side of the skirt. And similar to the front pattern pieces, we're going to line up the notches in the pocket with the notches in our skirt and pin those in place. And then add additional pins. Pin the other side the same way, and then take it to your sewing machine and baste it down in place using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Alright, after you have attached your pockets, make sure that you go ahead and press the pocket going away from the skirt. So press that down on both the back piece and also on the 2 front pieces. Alright, after you have your pockets nicely pressed, go ahead and lay out the back pattern piece with the right side facing up. Grab your front pieces, and we're going to lay these with the right sides facing each other. So you want to match up the pocket, also match up the side seam. Alright, when pinning up this side seam, the way I like to line everything up first is to make sure that the seams for the pockets are lined up with each other at the top. And then I go ahead and place a pin there to hold it. Then I also like to check right here at the bottom of the pocket, making sure that the seams are lined up. And you can I can feel it with my thumb that the seams are together, and then I place a pin there to hold it in place. And next, what I go ahead and do, starting at the bottom, I just go ahead and start adding pins. Next, go ahead and pin along the pocket area. Alright, next we need to find those notches that we made and place pins there. So we have a bottom notch in the pocket. So where we made that snip, go ahead and place a pin. And then there should also be a top notch in the pocket. So find that snip and place a pin. Alright, next what we're going to do is take this to our sewing machine. We'll start at the bottom of the skirt piece. We'll sew up until we get to this top notch in our pocket. We'll then sew around and stop. Then what we'll do is we'll sew a stitch starting at the top of the pocket all the way down until we get to this top notch in the pocket. And we'll use a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance to do that. And then once you're done with this side, you sew the other side the same exact way. Alright, starting at the bottom edge of the skirt, go ahead and line up the edge with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Lower your needle. Go ahead and begin sewing and backstitch. And we're going to keep sewing up until we get to that bottom notch in our pocket. Alright, once you reach that bottom notch, go ahead and lift up your presser foot. Make sure that your needle is still inside of your fabric. Go ahead and turn. And you want to get your pocket back lined up with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and you want to keep sewing. Alright, quick tip. As you're sewing around the pocket, I have my left hand here and my right hand here, and I am helping to pivot around the curve of the pocket. So as I'm sewing, I'm guiding, keeping the edge still lined up with 5/8 of an inch and pivoting around that curve. So just giving it a slight guide. I'm not doing a whole bunch of extra. Alright, to finish off this pocket, what you want to go ahead and do is, starting at the top edge, we're going to start at the top edge of the pocket. And you want to line up this seam with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So then go ahead and lower your needle. Begin sewing and backstitch. And we're going to keep sewing until we get to this top notch in the pocket. Once you reach that pin marking the top notch, go ahead and backstitch. Sew forward again, and then backstitch. Alright, once you are finished sewing the side seam, what you want to do is press the seam going towards the front piece of the skirt. So on the pocket and down here, make sure you're pressing the whole seam going towards the front of the skirt piece. After you're done with that, you want to, we're going to baste down the pocket. So you have two options. You can do a basting stitch, or you can use some pins to baste it down. So later on, when we attach this piece to the bodice, you don't want this pocket to actually end up going toward, you don't want the backwards pockets going towards, the back. You're not going to be able to wear that. So what you want to do is take a couple of pins and just pinning along where the pocket and the skirt meet. Just pin it there to hold it in place. All right, now if you prefer, you could do a basting stitch using 5/8 or 1/2 inch, just to hold it down so you won't have to worry about your pocket accidentally ending up in the back of your skirt. All right, so you'll do that to both sides. So even on the also on the other side. All right, if you'd like to baste your use a basting stitch to hold down the pocket instead of using the pins, you can do that, and you're only going to sew in between the top edges of the pocket. So starting at the start of the pocket, and I'm going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I'm just going to sew, no need to backstitch.